London, April 1847. The evening rain pattered against the window panes of the Cavendish townhouse, matching the rhythm of Elena's racing heart as she stared at the document before her. The candlelight flickered across the parchment, illuminating the elegant script that would forever alter her destiny. "You understand the terms, Miss Cavendish?" The solicitor's voice cut through the tense silence of her father's study. Eleanor Cavendish lifted her golden head, her blue eyes reflecting both resignation and resolve. At 22, she had once imagined a different future for herself, one filled with love and possibility. Now, she saw only duty. "I do, Mr. Holloway." Her voice remained steady despite the storm within her. "The agreement is clear." Across the mahogany desk, her father, Lord William Cavendish, avoided her gaze. Once a proud and prosperous man, he had been reduced to shadows and whispers, his shoulders bent under the weight of impending financial ruin. The gambling debts, the failed investments, the mortgaged properties, all of it had culminated in this moment. "Eleanor," he began, his voice breaking slightly, "if there were any other way—" "There isn't," she replied, more harshly than intended. Softening her tone, she added, "I've made my choice, Father." The truth hung unspoken between them. There was no choice, not really. Not when creditors circled like vultures and her younger sisters faced a future without dowries or prospects. Not when the Cavendish name, centuries old and once respected, teetered on the precipice of disgrace. The door to the study opened without warning, and Elena felt the air change even before she turned to face the newcomer. Arthur Wellesley, the 6th Duke of Thornfield, entered the room with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding attention. Tall and imposing in his perfectly tailored black coat, he surveyed the scene with cool detachment. At 35, his face bore the sharp, handsome features of aristocratic breeding, hardened by experience and authority. "Your Grace," the solicitor stammered, rising quickly. The Duke acknowledged him with a slight nod before his gaze settled on Eleanor. His eyes, grey as winter fog, revealed nothing as they assessed her. "Miss Cavendish." His voice was deep, controlled, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I trust the arrangements meet with your approval." Eleanor stood, determined to face her future husband as an equal, though society would never view them as such. "They do, Your Grace." "Excellent." He approached the desk, removing his gloves with deliberate precision. "Then let us conclude this business." Business. That was all this was to him. A transaction. The purchase of a bride to provide him with heirs and social standing. In exchange, the Cavendish family would receive enough funds to settle their debts and maintain their position in society. The Duke took the pen offered by the solicitor and signed his name with a flourish. When he extended the pen toward Eleanor, their fingers brushed briefly. She suppressed a shiver at the contact, taking the pen and signing her own name beneath his. Arthur Wellesley, Elena Cavendish. Two names bound together on paper, soon to be joined in a union that had nothing to do with affection and everything to do with necessity. "The wedding will take place 3 weeks from today," the Duke announced, addressing her father rather than her. "I've arranged everything at St. George's. The announcement will appear in tomorrow's papers." Lord Cavendish nodded gratefully. "Your generosity honors us, Your Grace." "It is a mutually beneficial arrangement," the Duke replied evenly, finally turning his attention back to Elena. "I will send a carriage for you tomorrow afternoon, Miss Cavendish. There are matters we must discuss regarding your future responsibilities as Duchess." Elena bristled at his tone but maintained her composure. "Of course, Your Grace." As if sensing her displeasure, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not quite a smile, but something akin to amusement. "Until tomorrow, then." With a formal bow to her father and a barely perceptible nod to her, the Duke of Thornfield departed as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving behind the scent of sandalwood and the oppressive weight of Elena's new reality. When the door closed, her father collapsed into his chair, relief washing over his features. "It is done," he whispered. "We are saved." Eleanor turned to the window, watching the Duke's carriage disappear into the rainy London night. "Yes," she replied softly, "but at what cost?" The following afternoon found Elena seated in the opulent drawing-room of Wellesley House, the Duke's London residence. Unlike the fading elegance of her family home, everything here spoke of wealth and power, from the gleaming marble floors to the priceless artwork adorning the walls. "His Grace will see you now, Miss Cavendish," announced the butler, his posture as rigid as his tone. Elena followed him through the grand hallway, her steps echoing against the marble. The Duke's study was a masculine domain of dark wood and leather, with towering bookshelves and a massive desk positioned before tall windows overlooking the gardens. Arthur stood with his back to her, gazing out at the meticulously maintained grounds. Without turning, he spoke. "Leave us, Phillips." The butler bowed and retreated, closing the heavy doors behind him. "Please, sit." The Duke gestured to a chair opposite his desk as he finally turned to face her. Eleanor complied, arranging her pale blue skirts carefully. She would not show fear or uncertainty, no matter how intimidating she found this man who would soon be her husband. "Tea?" he offered, surprising her with this small courtesy. "Yes, thank you." He poured from a silver service himself rather than summoning a servant, another unexpected gesture. As he handed her the delicate china cup, their fingers brushed again, and Elena noticed a momentary tension in his jaw. Taking his own seat, the Duke regarded her with that same inscrutable expression. "I believe we should establish certain understandings before our wedding, Miss Cavendish." "I would agree, Your Grace." "Arthur," he corrected her, "if we are to be married, you should use my given name, at least in private." "Then you must call me Elena," she replied, raising her chin slightly. Something flashed in his eyes, approval, perhaps, before it vanished behind his mask of indifference. "Very well, Elena." He leaned back in his chair. "Our arrangement is, as we both understand, one of mutual benefit. I require a duchess and heirs. Your family requires financial salvation. These terms are clear and need not be obscured by pretense." His bluntness, while jarring, was oddly refreshing after weeks of veiled conversations and polite fictions. "I appreciate your directness, Arthur. I've always found honesty more efficient than sentimentality," he replied. "After the wedding, you will assume all duties of the Duchess of Thornfield. You will manage the households, oversee the servants, attend and host appropriate social functions, and in time bear children to continue my lineage." Elena felt her cheeks warm at his clinical mention of children, but maintained her composure. "And what of your duties to me?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "Explain." "If I am to fulfill my obligations, I expect you to fulfill yours as well. I may be entering this marriage out of necessity, but I will not be treated as merely an acquisition." Arthur studied her for a long moment, and Elena feared she had overstepped. Then, unexpectedly, he inclined his head slightly. "Fair enough. You will have my name, my protection, my respect, and my fidelity. You and any children we may have will want for nothing. Your sisters will receive generous dowries, and your father's debts will be settled in full." He paused, his expression hardening almost imperceptibly. "What I cannot offer is the romantic attachment that young women are often led to expect from marriage. My first marriage cured me of such illusions." Eleanor had heard whispers of the Duke's brief, disastrous first marriage to Lady Caroline Somerset, who had reportedly betrayed him with his closest friend before dying in a riding accident 7 years earlier. The scandal had been substantial, even by London standards. "I do not expect romance, Your Grace, Arthur," she amended, "but I would hope for respect and perhaps in time friendship." "Respect you shall have," he replied evenly. "Friendship remains to be seen." He rose and moved to retrieve a small box from a cabinet. Returning to his desk, he placed it before her. "This belongs to the Duchess of Thornfield. It will be yours after the ceremony." Eleanor opened the box to find a magnificent sapphire and diamond ring, the ducal ring that had adorned the hand of every Duchess of Thornfield for generations. "It's beautiful," she murmured, closing the box carefully. "It is also symbolic," Arthur said. "Once you wear it, you become part of a lineage that stretches back centuries. The Wellesley name carries expectations, Eleanor. I trust you understand this." "I do." He nodded, apparently satisfied. "The dressmakers will arrive tomorrow to begin work on your trousseau. I've taken the liberty of arranging everything." "That's very—" Elena searched for the right word. "Efficient." For the first time, something resembling a genuine smile flickered across his face. "I am nothing if not efficient." As their meeting concluded and Elena prepared to depart, Arthur escorted her to the entrance hall. At the door, he hesitated, then said, "One more thing, Elena. After we are married, you will reside primarily at Wellesley Abbey in Hampshire. London society can be unkind to new duchesses, particularly those whose marriages are arranged as ours has been. The implication was clear. He meant to shield her from gossip and scrutiny by keeping her away from London. While part of her appreciated the consideration, another part bristled at being hidden away like something shameful. "I'm not afraid of London society, Arthur." "Perhaps you should be," he replied cryptically. "Nevertheless, we will return for the season. By then you will be established as my duchess, and certain adjustments will have been made." Before she could question his meaning, he bowed formally and handed her into the waiting carriage. As the vehicle pulled away from Wellesley House, Elena couldn't help wondering what kind of man she was truly agreeing to marry, and whether the mask of cold indifference he presented to the world concealed something more complex beneath. The wedding of the Duke of Thornfield and Miss Eleanor Cavendish took place exactly as planned, a lavish yet sombre affair at St. George's, Hanover Square, attended by the cream of London society. Eleanor had walked down the aisle in ivory silk and Honiton lace, her golden hair adorned with orange blossoms and family diamonds, looking every inch the aristocratic bride. If observers noted the bride's solemn expression or the groom's distant manner as they exchanged vows, such observations remained discreetly whispered behind gloved hands. The union of the wealthy, powerful duke with the daughter of an old but financially diminished family surprised few. Such alliances were the backbone of aristocratic society. 3 weeks after the wedding, Eleanor found herself standing at the window of her private sitting room at Wellesley Abbey, watching spring rain sweep across the expansive grounds. The ancient estate, with its grey stone walls and centuries of history, was to be her home now, yet it still felt foreign, as did her new title and identity as Duchess of Thornfield. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called, turning from the window. Mrs. Henderson, the housekeeper who had served the Wellesley family for over 30 years, stepped into the room and curtsied. "Your Grace, His Grace requests your presence in the library." Elena nodded, smoothing the folds of her emerald daydress. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I'll go to him now." As she made her way through the long gallery lined with ancestral portraits, Elena couldn't help feeling the weight of their painted gazes. Generations of Wellesley women who had come before her, each one born to the role she was now struggling to inhabit. The past 3 weeks had been a careful dance of politeness between her and Arthur. They took breakfast separately, dined together formally in the evening, and retired to separate chambers at night. The marriage remained unconsummated, a fact that both relieved and puzzled Eleanor. Arthur treated her with unfailing courtesy, but maintained an emotional distance that seemed unbridgeable. She found him in the library, seated at his desk surrounded by correspondence and account books. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, catching the silver at his temples, the only indication of age in his otherwise vigorous appearance. "You wish to see me, Arthur?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, his expression softening almost imperceptibly at the sight of her. "Yes, Eleanor, please come in." Setting aside his papers, he gestured to a chair near the desk. "I've had word from London. Lady Pemberton is hosting her annual midsummer ball in 3 weeks. We are expected to attend." Eleanor felt a flutter of both excitement and apprehension. "We're returning to London." "Briefly," he confirmed. "It would be noticed if we were absent, particularly so soon after our marriage. Speculation is unhelpful." The practical consideration behind his decision was clear, yet Elena couldn't help feeling that there was more to it than social obligation. "Is there something specific about this ball that concerns you?" Arthur's gaze sharpened. In their short time together, she had noticed his surprise whenever she perceived more than he intended to reveal. "You are perceptive," he acknowledged. "Lady Pemberton is a significant figure in society, and her favor can influence many. More importantly, she was my mother's closest friend and has certain expectations regarding my marriage." "She disapproves of me," Eleanor surmised. "She hasn't met you," Arthur replied evenly, "but she had other candidates in mind for my second wife. Her own niece, Lady Beatrice Ashworth, chief among them." The name was familiar. Lady Beatrice was known as one of London's most celebrated beauties, from an impeccable lineage and with a substantial fortune. Elena had glimpsed her at social functions, always surrounded by admirers. "I see," she said carefully. "And was Lady Beatrice a serious consideration?" Something hardened in Arthur's expression. "No." though many assumed otherwise. The clipped response suggested deeper waters that Eleanor was not yet privileged to navigate. She changed tack. "What will be expected of me at this ball?" "You will be scrutinized as my new Duchess," he stated plainly. "Your appearance, your manners, your conversation, all will be judged against the standard of what a Duchess of Thornfield should be." "And if I fall short?" Elena challenged, a hint of defiance in her tone. Arthur regarded her steadily. "You won't." His confidence, however calculated, warmed her unexpectedly. "You seem very certain of that." "I chose you for a reason, Eleanor," he said, rising from his desk to stand by the window. "Despite the circumstances of our arrangement, I did not select my bride carelessly." Before she could ask what he meant, he continued, "Mrs. Henderson will arrange for the London house to be prepared. We'll depart in 2 weeks' time. In the meantime," he turned back to her, "there is something else I wish to discuss." From a drawer in his desk, he removed a leather portfolio and handed it to her. "As Duchess, you now have certain responsibilities, including charitable patronages traditionally associated with the Wellesley family. These are the current organizations. You may continue them or select new ones as you see fit." Eleanor opened the folder, scanning the list of orphanages, hospitals, and educational institutions. "You're giving me complete discretion?" "Within reason," he qualified. "The Duchess of Thornfield has historically maintained certain commitments, but yes, you have autonomy in how you direct your charitable efforts." It was the first real authority he had granted her, a small acknowledgement of her position that felt significant nonetheless. "Thank you, Arthur. I'll review these carefully." He nodded, then hesitated before adding, "There is one more matter. Your sister, Miss Charlotte, has been invited to join us in London. I thought perhaps you might appreciate her company, and it would be an opportunity for her to be introduced to society under your sponsorship." The unexpected thoughtfulness of this gesture caught Elena by surprise. Charlotte, just 18 and the closest to her in age among her sisters, had been heartbroken at their separation after the wedding. "That's very kind of you," she said, genuinely touched. Arthur dismissed the sentiment with a slight wave. "It's practical. Your sister will need to make an advantageous match eventually. Association with the Thornfield name will only improve her prospects." Even as he framed the invitation in terms of practicality, Eleanor sensed there might be more to it. A small concession to her happiness, perhaps. Or merely another calculated move in whatever game he was playing. "Still, I am grateful," she persisted. "Charlotte will be overjoyed." A fleeting softness passed over his features. Then it settled. "You may write to her today if you wish." As their meeting concluded and Elena rose to leave, Arthur called after her, "One more thing, Elena." She turned questioningly. "For the Pemberton ball?" He hesitated, then continued with unusual hesitation, "Lady Beatrice and her circle can be challenging. If at any point you find yourself uncomfortable, you need only signal to me. I would not have you distressed." The concern, however formally expressed, suggested a protectiveness she hadn't expected. "Thank you, Arthur, but I believe I can manage Lady Beatrice and her friends." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt it. Still, the offer stands." As Elena left the library, she felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere between them. Not quite warmth, but perhaps the first fragile bridge across the chasm of their arranged union. The Pemberton townhouse blazed with light, a beacon of aristocratic splendor in Berkeley Square. Carriages lined the street, disgorging finely dressed nobles into the warm June evening. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast their glow over marble floors and gilded furnishings, while an orchestra played from the ballroom, and champagne flowed freely. Helena stood at the top of the grand staircase, acutely aware of every eye that turned in her direction, as the majordomo announced, "His Grace, the Duke of Thornfield, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Thornfield." Arthur stood beside her, resplendent in formal evening wear, his expression unreadable as always. As they descended, he placed her hand on his arm, leaning close to murmur, "Remember who you are now." The simple reminder straightened her spine and lifted her chin. She was Duchess of Thornfield. Regardless of how she had attained the title, it was hers now, and she would wear it with dignity. Lady Pemberton awaited them at the foot of the stairs, an imposing woman in her 60s, dressed in plum silk with an impressive display of diamonds at her throat. Her shrewd eyes assessed Elena with undisguised curiosity. "Arthur, my dear boy," she greeted him with obvious affection, offering her cheek for his kiss. "How well you look." "Lady Pemberton," he replied warmly. "May I present my wife, Elena, Duchess of Thornfield?" The older woman's smile cooled several degrees as she turned to Elena. "Your Grace," she acknowledged, with a perfectly correct, yet somehow diminished curtsy. "Welcome to my home. We are all most interested to make your acquaintance." "You're very kind, Lady Pemberton," Elena replied smoothly, refusing to be intimidated. "Arthur has spoken highly of your long friendship with his family." "Has he indeed?" Lady Pemberton's gaze flickered to Arthur, who remained impassive. "Well, the Wellesleys have been dear to me for decades. I knew Arthur's mother from our days as debutantes. Her emphasis on lineage was subtle but unmistakable. How fortunate to have such enduring connections," Elena replied, maintaining her composure. Lady Pemberton's lips thinned slightly. "Yes, well, do enjoy the ball. Arthur, Beatrice was asking after you earlier. I believe she's by the terrace doors." With a final assessing glance at Elena, she moved away to greet other guests. "Round one," Arthur murmured, a hint of sardonic amusement in his voice. "You handled her well." "The evening is young," Elena replied under her breath. As they circulated through the crowded ballroom, the pattern of reception became clear. Those who depended on the Duke's goodwill or business, and there were many, greeted Elena with excessive deference. Others, secure in their own position, displayed a range of reactions from polite curiosity to barely concealed disdain. The whispers followed them. Cavendish girl, family nearly ruined, arranged match, no dowry to speak of. Arthur seemed oblivious to the undercurrent, or perhaps merely accustomed to it. He performed his social duties with practiced efficiency, introducing Elena to a blur of faces and titles. It was during a brief moment alone, while Arthur was engaged in conversation with a government minister, that Elena first encountered Lady Beatrice Ashworth directly. "Your Grace," came a melodious voice from behind her. "How delightful to finally meet you." Elena turned to find herself face to face with a striking woman approximately her own age. Lady Beatrice was undeniably beautiful, with glossy dark hair, luminous skin, and eyes the color of amber. Her burgundy gown emphasized her perfect figure, and diamonds glittered at her ears and throat. "Lady Beatrice," Eleanor acknowledged, instantly recognizing her from Arthur's description. "The pleasure is mine." Beatrice's smile was a masterpiece of social artifice. "I must congratulate you on your marriage. It was all so sudden. Arthur is notoriously selective, you know. We were all quite astonished when the announcement appeared." "Thank you," Elena replied simply, refusing to engage with the implied question. Undeterred, Beatrice continued, her voice honeyed with false warmth. "You must find it all rather overwhelming. The title, the responsibilities. Thornfield has been without a duchess for so long. Arthur's mother, the late Duchess, was such a formidable woman. They say Wellesley Abbey has never been the same without her guiding hand." "Every generation brings its own changes," Elena observed carefully. "Change can be refreshing." "How progressive of you," Beatrice remarked with a tinkling laugh that attracted the attention of nearby guests. "Though some traditions are sacred, wouldn't you agree? Especially in families like the Wellesleys, where lineage is everything." The barb was expertly delivered, reminding Elena and anyone listening of her comparatively modest background. "Traditions evolve, Lady Beatrice," Elena countered calmly. "Otherwise we'd all still be living in caves." A flash of anger crossed Beatrice's perfect features before she composed herself. "How charmingly unconventional. But then, Arthur always did have unexpected tastes, even in his first marriage." The reference to Caroline, Arthur's first wife, was deliberately provocative. Elena maintained her smile, though her pulse quickened at the obvious attack. "If you'll excuse me," she said, preparing to step away, "I should rejoin my husband." "Of course," Beatrice replied, her voice rising just enough to be heard by those nearby. "Though one does wonder how long Arthur's interest will last this time. He's always been restless, you know, always seeking something new when the shine wears off the old." Before Elena could respond, a new voice entered the conversation, cool, measured, and unmistakably authoritative. "Lady Beatrice," Arthur said, materializing at Elena's side, "I see you've met my wife." Beatrice's demeanor transformed instantly. her face softening into a look of undisguised adoration. "Arthur, I was just becoming acquainted with the new Duchess. How remiss of you not to introduce us sooner." "An oversight," he replied, his tone revealing nothing as he placed a protective hand at the small of Elena's back. "If you'll excuse us, I believe this waltz belongs to my wife." Without waiting for a response, he guided Elena toward the dance floor, his touch firm but gentle. As they took their positions for the waltz, Elena noted the tension in his jaw. "I apologize," he said quietly, as they began to move with the music. "I should have anticipated Beatrice would approach you." "There's no need for apology," Elena assured him, surprised by his concern. "I can handle a few barbed comments." His gaze was intent as he studied her face. "She mentioned Caroline." "Briefly," Elena confirmed. Then, emboldened by his apparent displeasure with Beatrice, asked, "Was there ever any truth to the rumors about you and Lady Beatrice? That she was intended to be your second wife?" Arthur's expression darkened. Beatrice's expectations were her own creation, encouraged by Lady Pemberton. "I never gave her reason to believe I would offer for her." The dance brought them closer, his hand warm against her waist. "Why not?" Elena found herself asking. "She's beautiful, well-connected, wealthy, and reminds me too much of Caroline," he finished bluntly. The candid admission surprised her. It was the first time he had voluntarily mentioned his first wife. "I see," Elena murmured, though in truth she understood very little about the man who was now her husband, his past pains, his present motivations, or what he truly wanted from their arrangement beyond its practical benefits. The waltz ended, and as they left the dance floor, Elena became aware of the curious glances directed their way. Despite the circumstances of their marriage, they made a striking couple, the powerful, austere Duke and his unexpectedly poised young Duchess. The evening progressed with the predictable rhythm of aristocratic entertainment. Dinner was served, toasts were made, and the dancing resumed with increased animation as the champagne flowed more freely. Elena was resting between dances, observing the swirling figures on the floor, when Lady Pemberton approached her once more. "You dance well, Your Grace," the older woman remarked, seating herself beside Elena. "Arthur seems pleased with his choice." "Thank you, Lady Pemberton," Elena replied cautiously, sensing this was more than casual conversation. The dowager fanned herself slowly, her jewels catching the light. "I've known Arthur since he was a boy, you know. Watched him grow into the man he is today. Witnessed his first marriage and its unfortunate conclusion." Elena remained silent, unwilling to be drawn into gossip about Arthur's past. "He was devastated by Caroline's betrayal," Lady Pemberton continued, her voice lowered conspiratorially. "Completely withdrew from society afterward. Many of us feared he would never remarry." "Life often takes unexpected turns," Eleanor observed neutrally. Lady Pemberton's gaze sharpened. "Indeed. Though I confess I was surprised when he chose you, my dear. Not that you aren't charming, but the Cavendish situation is well known, and Arthur has always been so particular about connections." The implication was clear. Elena was considered beneath Arthur's station, accepted only because of some inexplicable whim. "Perhaps the Duke values qualities beyond mere social position," Elena suggested, maintaining her dignity despite the insult. "Perhaps," Lady Pemberton conceded with obvious skepticism. "Or perhaps he simply desired a docile bride who would be sufficiently grateful for the elevation in status not to question his continued independence." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm with indignation. "I believe you misunderstand the nature of our marriage, Lady Pemberton." "Do I?" The older woman smiled thinly. "Time will tell, I suppose. But a word of advice, my dear. Men like Arthur require more than a pretty face and a grateful heart to remain content. Caroline learned that lesson too late." Before Eleanor could formulate a response that wouldn't cause a scene, Lady Pemberton rose and drifted away, leaving her alone with the unsettling insinuation. The evening took a decisive turn as the clock approached midnight. Eleanor, momentarily separated from Arthur, as he spoke with a group of gentlemen, found herself surrounded by Beatrice and 3 other ladies of similar rank and temperament. "Your Grace," Beatrice greeted her with exaggerated deference, her amber eyes glittering with malice barely concealed beneath a veneer of politeness. "We were just discussing the recent changes at Wellesley Abbey. I understand you've been making alterations to the Duchess's suite." Eleanor straightened, instantly alert to the danger. "Minor refreshments only. The Abbey has a distinguished history that deserves respect." "How diplomatic," remarked one of Beatrice's companions, Lady Sophia Harrington, if Eleanor recalled correctly. "Though one wonders if you find it difficult, sleeping in chambers that belonged to the previous Duchess for so long, and occupying a position that many thought would eventually be Beatrice's," added another, with a meaningful glance between them. Beatrice affected a modest protest, though her expression revealed her pleasure at the comment. "Now, Isabella, you'll embarrass her Grace. It's hardly her fault that the Duke's financial intervention was so urgently required by the Cavendish family. We all make sacrifices for duty." The implication that Elena had essentially been purchased to save her family struck at her deepest insecurity about the marriage, yet she refused to show how deeply the barb had landed. "How fortunate, then," she replied with deliberate calm, "that duty and inclination sometimes align." Beatrice's smile tightened. "Indeed. How interesting. One hears such different accounts of life at Wellesley Abbey these days. Some say the Duke spends more time in London than at home, and that separate chambers have been maintained. But perhaps that's merely practical." The comment drew interested murmurs from the growing circle of listeners. Elena realized with dismay that they had attracted an audience and that Arthur was nowhere in sight. "Lady Beatrice," she began, keeping her voice even despite her racing heart, "I'm not sure what purpose these insinuations serve, but—" "Oh, no insinuations, Your Grace," Beatrice interrupted, her voice rising slightly to ensure it carried to those nearby. "Merely observations. After all, everyone understands the arrangement. The Duke required a duchess for appearance's sake, and your family required salvation from ruin. A perfectly reasonable exchange." The blunt statement, delivered in the midst of the ballroom, sent a ripple of shocked whispers through the assembled guests. Elena felt the blood drain from her face as dozens of eyes turned toward her, some pitying, others avid with curiosity or disdain. She began, but Beatrice pressed her advantage mercilessly. "There's no need for pretense among friends, Your Grace. We all admire your practicality, and the Duke's generosity, of course. Though one does wonder—" Here she paused dramatically, ensuring maximum impact for her next words. "How it feels to know you were chosen not for yourself, but merely as the most convenient vessel for the Wellesley heir. A transaction rather than a union." The calculated cruelty of the attack, delivered with such precision in such a public setting, momentarily robbed Elena of response. In that terrible silence, she felt the weight of every stare, every whispered comment, every judgment. Then suddenly the crowd parted, and Arthur was there, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene before him. His gaze moved from Eleanor's pale face to Beatrice's triumphant smile, understanding instantly what had transpired. "Lady Beatrice," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "I believe you've overstepped." Beatrice's confidence wavered slightly at his tone, but she attempted to maintain her position. "Arthur, I was merely making conversation with your—" "My wife," he interrupted coldly, "the Duchess of Thornfield, to whom you owe both respect and courtesy, neither of which you appear capable of offering." The rebuke, delivered with such public firmness, caused Beatrice to flush deeply. "I meant no offence," she stammered, suddenly aware of the turning tide as Arthur's clear anger registered with the onlookers. "Quiet offence was given," Arthur replied, his voice carrying easily in the hushed ballroom, "and not for the first time. Your persistent inability to accept reality has become tiresome, Beatrice." He turned to Elena then, and what happened next would become the talk of London for months to come. In full view of the assembled aristocracy, the Duke of Thornfield, known for his reserve and formality, took his wife's face gently between his hands and kissed her. Not a chaste, perfunctory gesture, but a kiss of unmistakable passion and possessiveness that left no doubt about his feelings. When he finally drew back, his eyes remained locked with Elena's, something fierce and protective in his gaze. "Come, my love," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear clearly. "I believe we've had quite enough of this evening's entertainment." The silence that followed them as Arthur led Elena from the ballroom was profound, broken only by the furious sobs of Lady Beatrice and the excited whispers that erupted in their wake. In the carriage returning to their London residence, Elena sat in stunned silence, her fingers pressed to lips that still tingled from his unexpected kiss. "Why did you do that?" she finally asked, as they traveled through the quiet streets. Arthur, seated opposite her, regarded her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher in the dim light. "Because it was necessary." "Necessary," she repeated, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice. "To salvage appearances, you mean?" "No," he said quietly. "To protect what is mine." The possessive declaration hung between them, complicated by all that remained unsaid. Elena studied his face, searching for some clue to the emotions behind his controlled exterior. "Lady Beatrice was not entirely wrong, was she?" she asked, needing to confront the truth between them. "Our marriage was a transaction." Arthur's jaw tightened. "It began that way," he acknowledged, "but Beatrice was wrong about why I chose you." "Then why did you?" Elena pressed, emboldened by the events of the evening. "Out of all the eligible women in London, why select the daughter of a ruined family?" The carriage swayed gently as it continued through London's darkened streets. Arthur's face was half in shadow, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in his expression as he considered her question. "I chose you," he finally said, his voice low, "because unlike the others, you looked at me rather than my title or fortune." Elena's breath caught at this unexpected admission. "When we first met, at Lady Harrington's musical evening last winter," he continued, "you were the only woman in the room who didn't simper or scheme. You spoke your mind about Beethoven's sonata, while everyone else merely echoed whatever opinion they thought I held. That impressed me." Elena remembered the evening well, a brief, unremarkable conversation she'd nearly forgotten. She had no idea he'd even noticed her. "I observed you after that," Arthur admitted, "the way you cared for your sisters, your dignity despite your family's declining circumstances, your intelligence. When I learned of your father's situation, I saw an opportunity that could benefit us both." His gaze met hers directly now. "I didn't want another Caroline, someone who married me for my position while harboring resentments and desires elsewhere. I wanted someone with strength of character, who would uphold the responsibilities of a duchess, someone who understood duty and loyalty." "You make me sound like a suitable horse," Elena said softly, "chosen for good breeding and temperament." A flicker of something, regret perhaps, crossed his face. "That was not my intention. I meant to compliment your character, not diminish your worth." The carriage turned into the courtyard of their London house, and Arthur hesitated before adding, "What happened tonight, Beatrice's cruelty, was my fault. I should have anticipated it and protected you better." "I don't need protection," Elena insisted, though his concern touched her. "Only honesty." As the carriage stopped, Arthur surprised her by moving to sit beside her, taking her gloved hand in his. "Then honestly, Eleanor, I am pleased with our arrangement, more than I expected to be." It wasn't a declaration of affection, but from this reserved, guarded man it felt significant. The warmth of his hand through her glove, the intensity of his gaze, these spoke of something evolving between them that neither had anticipated. The footman opened the carriage door, interrupting the moment. Arthur helped her down, his hand remaining at the small of her back as they entered the house. In the grand entrance hall, he paused. "Tomorrow we return to Wellesley Abbey," he said, "unless you prefer to remain in London longer." "No," Elena decided. "I think we've given society enough to gossip about for one evening." Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Indeed. Good night, Elena." He bent and, to her surprise, placed a gentle kiss on her forehead before turning toward his study. "Arthur," she called after him, gathering her courage, "that kiss at the ball, was it merely for appearance's sake?" He stopped but didn't turn fully. "No," he said simply. "It was not." With that cryptic response, he disappeared down the corridor, leaving Elena to contemplate this new, confusing shift in their carefully negotiated relationship. The return to Wellesley Abbey brought a subtle but unmistakable change in their dynamic. While they still maintained separate chambers and many of the formal aspects of their arrangement, other boundaries began to blur. Arthur no longer confined himself exclusively to his study, but joined Elena in the library or drawing room in the evenings. They spoke of books, music, the estate management, conversations that gradually became less guarded, occasionally even warm. On a particularly fine morning in late June, Elena was reviewing correspondence in her sitting room when a knock came at the door. To her surprise, it was Arthur, rather than a servant who entered at her invitation. "I thought you might like to see the Eastern Gardens today," he said without preamble. "The roses are at their peak, and the head gardener tells me you've taken an interest in his work." The invitation, so casually offered, represented another small breach in the wall between them. "I'd like that very much," Eleanor replied, setting aside her letters. They walked together through the formal gardens, the morning sun warming the ancient stone walls and highlighting the vibrant blooms. Arthur, to her surprise, knew the history of every section, which Duchess had commissioned which planting, how the design had evolved over generations. "My mother loved these gardens," he told her, as they paused by a particularly magnificent display of white roses. "After she died, my father let them fall into disrepair. When I inherited, restoring them was one of my first projects." It was the most personal information he had volunteered about his family, and Eleanor treasured the small confidence. "They're beautiful," she said sincerely. "Your mother would be proud." Arthur's expression softened momentarily. Perhaps. She was difficult to please. "And was your father equally demanding?" Eleanor ventured, curious about the family that had shaped him. "My father was," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "a traditional duke, concerned with duty, lineage, appearances, not given to displays of affection or approval." The measured description suggested deeper complexities that Arthur wasn't ready to share, but even this glimpse into his past felt like progress. As they continued their walk, Elena gathered her courage to address what had remained unspoken between them since their return from London. "Arthur, about what happened at the Pemberton ball—" "You were exemplary," he interrupted. "Lady Beatrice behaved abominably, but you maintained your dignity admirably." "Thank you. But that's not what I meant to discuss," Elena persisted gently. "Since that night, things between us have seemed different." Arthur stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the clear morning light, his grey eyes appeared less forbidding than usual. "Different how?" "Less formal," she clarified. "More like a true marriage than a business arrangement." His expression became guarded again. "Does that concern you?" "No," Eleanor answered honestly. "It confuses me. I'm not sure what you want from me now." Arthur was silent for a long moment, studying her face as if searching for something. "What I want," he finally said, "is complex. When we married, I believed I could maintain a distance. Emotional detachment seemed safer, cleaner. But I find myself unexpectedly drawn to you, Elena. Your courage, your grace under pressure. It has made me question my own careful rules." The admission, delivered with such reluctant honesty, touched her deeply. "I felt it too," she confessed. "This shift between us." Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes before he masked it. "We should proceed carefully. My first marriage taught me the dangers of allowing sentiment to cloud judgment." "What happened with Caroline?" Elena asked softly, knowing she was treading on sensitive ground but needing to understand the shadows that still haunted him. Arthur's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would refuse to answer, retreat behind his walls of reserve. Instead, he gestured to a stone bench nestled among the roses. "Sit with me." When they were seated, he began, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of old pain. "Caroline Somerset was the most celebrated debutante of her season, beautiful, accomplished, from an impeccable family. Our marriage was considered the match of the decade." He paused, staring out across the gardens. "I was 27, recently inherited, and believed myself in love. Caroline seemed equally enamored, or so I thought. The first year was happy, or what I believed was happiness." Another pause, longer this time. "Then I discovered her affair with James Blackwood, my closest friend since childhood. It had been ongoing since before our wedding." Eleanor's heart ached at the betrayal he described. "Arthur, I'm so sorry." "The worst part wasn't the infidelity," he continued as if he hadn't heard her. "It was learning that our entire marriage had been a charade. She married me for my title while loving him. Every tender moment, every intimate confidence, all false. The revelation explained so much about his guarded nature, his reluctance to trust." "And her death?" Eleanor asked gently. "The riding accident occurred 3 months after I confronted her," Arthur said, his voice flat. "She was attempting to reach Blackwood's estate through the woodland path, a dangerous route in poor weather. Her horse stumbled on the rain-slick stones of the old bridge. His hands clenched slightly. Society blamed me, of course. Whispers that I had driven her to desperation, that I had been cold and unforgiving. Lady Pemberton was particularly vocal in her criticism. "Is that why you avoided remarrying for so long?" Arthur nodded slowly. Marriage seemed an unnecessary risk. I had an heir in my nephew, my younger brother's son. There seemed no reason to subject myself to potential betrayal again. "Until your family's financial difficulties created an opportunity," Eleanor supplied, unable to keep a hint of hurt from her voice. He turned to her then, his expression intense. "Yes, initially. But Eleanor, you must understand. I selected you specifically because I believed you incapable of Caroline's kind of deception. You've never pretended to feel what you don't." "And what do you believe I feel now?" she asked quietly. Arthur's gaze searched her face. "I don't know," he admitted. "That uncertainty is my discomforting, yet I find myself wanting to discover the answer." The confession, halting and imperfect, nevertheless represented a profound shift in their relationship, an acknowledgement that whatever had begun as a transaction had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. Before Elena could respond, the moment was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Henderson, hurrying down the garden path with uncharacteristic haste. "Your Grace," she called, addressing Arthur, "a messenger has arrived from London. Lord Cavendish has suffered an apoplectic fit. He's asking for Her Grace." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. "Father," she whispered, rising quickly, "how serious is it?" "The message didn't say, Your Grace," Mrs. Henderson replied sympathetically, "only that your presence is urgently requested." Arthur stood, immediately decisive. "Have the travelling carriage prepared immediately," he instructed the housekeeper, "and send word to Dr. Morris to meet us in London." To Eleanor he added, "Go and pack whatever you need. We'll depart within the hour." His efficiency was a comfort in her distress. "Thank you, Arthur. He's your father," he replied simply. "Of course we must go to him." The journey to London passed in anxious silence. Arthur had arranged for fresh horses at each posting station, enabling them to make the trip in record time, yet it still felt agonizingly slow to Elena. He sat beside her rather than opposite, his steady presence providing silent support as she wrestled with fear for her father's condition. They arrived at the Cavendish townhouse well after midnight. Charlotte met them at the door, her young face pale with worry as she embraced her sister. "Oh, Elena, I'm so relieved you've come. How is he?" Eleanor asked urgently. "Stable for now," Charlotte replied, leading them upstairs. "Dr. Winters says it was a severe attack, but father is strong. He's been asking for you continuously." Outside Lord Cavendish's bedchamber, Eleanor hesitated, turning to Arthur. Would you come in with me?" The request seemed to surprise him, but he nodded. "If you wish it." Lord Cavendish lay propped against pillows, his once robust frame diminished, his complexion alarmingly grey. His eyes, however, brightened at the sight of his eldest daughter. "Elena," he whispered, extending a trembling hand. "My dear girl." She rushed to his side, taking his hand carefully. "Father, we came as quickly as we could." "We," he repeated, his gaze moving past her to Arthur, who stood respectfully at the foot of the bed. "Your Grace, you brought her yourself." "I am grateful." Arthur inclined his head. "You need not thank me, sir. Elena is my wife. Her family is now my family as well." The simple statement, delivered without hesitation, sent a flood of warmth through Eleanor. There was nothing of calculation or duty in Arthur's manner now, only a genuine concern that touched her deeply. Dr. Winters, a grave-faced gentleman with spectacles, drew them aside after a brief examination. "His lordship needs absolute rest and calm," he informed them quietly. "The next few days will be critical. Another attack could prove fatal." "I'll stay with him," Eleanor decided immediately. "We both will," Arthur amended, surprising her. "I've already sent for additional staff from Wellesley House, and Dr. Morris will arrive by morning to consult with Dr. Winters." His decisive action and unexpected support overwhelmed her. As the doctor departed and Charlotte went to oversee the preparation of rooms for their extended stay, Eleanor found herself alone with Arthur in the corridor outside her father's chamber. "Arthur, I don't know how to thank you," she began. "There is no need," he interrupted gently. This is what marriage means, standing together in difficulties as well as in celebration. The words were so contrary to their original agreement, so far from the practical arrangement they had negotiated, that Elena could only stare at him in wonder. That's not what you said when we signed our contract. Perhaps I've reconsidered certain aspects of our arrangement, he replied, something vulnerable flickering in his expression before it was concealed once more behind his usual reserve. Rest now, Elena. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and brushed his lips against her forehead, a brief, tender gesture that felt more intimate than their passionate kiss at the Pemberton ball. Then he was gone, striding down the corridor to make arrangements for their unexpected stay in London. The following days established a new pattern between them. Arthur took charge of the household arrangements with quiet efficiency, consulting with doctors, managing visitors, and ensuring Elena had whatever she needed to care for her father. He sat with Lord Cavendish himself for hours, reading to the older man or simply providing company when Elena needed rest. Charlotte observed this shift in their relationship with barely concealed curiosity. "He's not at all what I expected," she confided to Elena one evening as they took tea in the drawing room while Arthur was meeting with the family solicitor. "From the rumours, I thought the Duke of Thornfield was cold and unapproachable." "He can be," Eleanor acknowledged, smiling slightly. "But there's more to him than society sees." "He cares for you," Charlotte stated with the directness of youth. "Anyone with eyes can see it." Elena's heart quickened at her sister's assessment. "Our relationship is evolving," she admitted cautiously. "It began as one thing and is becoming something else entirely." "Something better?" Charlotte pressed hopefully. "Something truer," Elena replied after considering her words carefully, "though I'm not yet certain where it leads." That uncertainty remained as Lord Cavendish gradually recovered over the following 2 weeks. The crisis had brought Elena and Arthur closer in ways neither had anticipated, but neither had spoken directly of the change between them. They worked together as partners during the day, but still retired to separate chambers at night, a physical distance that increasingly failed to reflect their emotional proximity. On a warm July evening, with Lord Cavendish finally well enough to sit up in a chair by the window, Arthur found Elena alone in the small garden behind the townhouse. She stood among the neglected roses, lost in thought as the setting sun cast long shadows across the overgrown beds. "Your father seems much improved," he observed, coming to stand beside her. Eleanor nodded, grateful for his steady presence these past difficult weeks. "Dr. Morris believes he may be able to travel to Bath by the end of the month. The waters there might help his complete recovery." "I've already made inquiries about suitable accommodations," Arthur told her, "and arrangements for Charlotte and your younger sisters to join him there." The thoughtfulness of this gesture, anticipating her family's needs without being asked, moved her deeply. "Arthur, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You've gone far beyond what our arrangement required." He was silent for a moment, his expression unreadable in the gathering twilight. "Perhaps we should discuss our arrangement, as you call it." Elena's heart quickened at his serious tone. "What about it? I find it no longer accurately reflects the reality between us," he stated carefully. "When I proposed our marriage, I believed I could maintain a practical detachment. Recent events have challenged that assumption." She held her breath, afraid to hope yet unable to suppress the warmth spreading through her at his words. "In what way?" Arthur turned to face her fully, his customary reserve giving way to an intensity that made her pulse race. "I care for you, Elena, far more than I intended or expected. These weeks, seeing your strength and grace under pressure, your devotion to your family, they have affected me profoundly." "Arthur," she whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. He took her hands in his touch gentle yet firm. "I don't expect you to return these feelings. Our marriage began as a practical arrangement, and you have fulfilled your part admirably. But I find I want more than what we agreed upon. I want a true marriage, in every sense." The vulnerability in his admission, this proud, guarded man laying his heart before her, moved Elena beyond words. In that moment, she recognized the truth of her own feelings, growing steadily since that kiss at the Pemberton ball, perhaps even before. "I want that too," she confessed softly. "I've come to care for you, Arthur, the man behind the Duke's facade. These weeks have shown me who you truly are, beyond titles and transactions." Something like wonder crossed his face at her words. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he drew her closer. "May I kiss you, Elena? Not for appearances or obligation, but because I desire it more than anything." In answer, she lifted her face to his. This kiss was different from their first, not a public declaration or statement of possession, but a tender exploration, a beginning rather than a tactical maneuver. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as the last light faded from the garden and the first stars appeared above them. When they finally parted, Arthur rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he murmured, "to Wellesley Abbey. Not as my duchess in name only, but as my wife in truth." "Yes," Elena whispered, her heart full of newfound hope. "Yes, I will." Autumn painted the Hampshire countryside in brilliant hues of gold and crimson as the carriage bearing the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield passed through the massive gates of Wellesley Abbey. 3 months had elapsed since Lord Cavendish's illness and the transformation of Elena and Arthur's marriage from arrangement to genuine union. After ensuring her father's comfortable establishment in Bath, with Charlotte and the younger girls settled nearby under the supervision of a respectable companion, Elena had returned with Arthur to Wellesley Abbey in August. The intervening weeks had seen their relationship deepen and flourish, the initial tentative affection blossoming into something neither had dared hope for at the outset of their union. Now returning from a brief visit to London where Arthur had business with his solicitors, Elena gazed out at the familiar landscape with a sense of homecoming that would have been unimaginable to her 6 months earlier. "Happy to be back?" Arthur asked, noting her expression. Elena smiled, reaching for his hand. "Very much so. London has its attractions, but Wellesley has become home to me now." The simple admission pleased him visibly. "And you've made it more of a home than it has been in decades," he told her. "Mrs. Henderson commented just last week that the Abbey hasn't felt so alive since my mother was alive." Coming from the reserved housekeeper who had initially viewed Elena with skepticism, this was high praise indeed. "I'm glad," she replied sincerely, "though I've hardly made dramatic changes." "You've changed more than you realize," Arthur said thoughtfully, "not just in the house, but in those who inhabit it, including me." The carriage rolled to a stop before the imposing front entrance, where the staff had assembled to greet their return. As Arthur handed Elena down, she was struck once again by the contrast between her first arrival as a nervous bride and her return now as a confident, beloved duchess. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward with a formal curtsy that couldn't quite suppress her smile. "Welcome home, Your Graces. We've prepared everything as requested." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson," Elena replied warmly. "It's good to be back." As they entered the grand hall, Arthur kept Eleanor's hand on his arm, leaning close to murmur, "I have something to show you. After dinner, if you're not too tired from the journey." His secretive smile intrigued her. "I'm not at all tired. What is it?" "Patience," he teased, a playfulness that still surprised and delighted her. "All will be revealed in due course." The evening passed pleasantly with a quiet dinner in the small dining room they preferred when not entertaining. Afterward, Arthur led Elena through the west wing of the Abbey, toward a section she had rarely visited. "Where are we going?" she asked, curiosity growing as they proceeded down corridors she didn't recognize. "You'll see," was all he would say, his expression both serious and anticipatory. They stopped before an ornately carved door that Elena didn't recall seeing before. Arthur hesitated, suddenly appearing almost nervous, an emotion she had rarely observed in him. "These rooms have been closed for many years," he explained. "They were my parents' private apartments, separate from the formal ducal chambers you've seen. After my mother died, my father sealed them off. I never had reason to open them again until now." With that mysterious statement, he produced a key and unlocked the door, leading Elena into a suite of rooms that took her breath away. Unlike the imposing grandeur of the staterooms or the masculine austerity of Arthur's current chambers, these apartments were elegant yet intimate, designed for comfort as well as beauty. A sitting room opened into a study on one side and a bedchamber on the other, all connected by doorways rather than formal corridors. The furnishings were exquisite but welcoming, with comfortable chairs positioned near the fireplaces and windows, offering spectacular views of the eastern gardens. "This is beautiful," Elena breathed, turning slowly to take it all in. "Why have I never seen these rooms before?" Arthur watched her reaction closely. "They belonged to my parents during the happiest years of their marriage, before duty and disappointment drove them apart. My mother created these spaces as a private retreat where they could be simply husband and wife rather than duke and duchess." He moved to open the curtains wider, allowing more of the evening light to filter in. "I've had them cleaned and restored over the past month while we were away. New fabrics, new furnishings where needed, but maintaining my mother's original design." Eleanor's heart quickened as she began to understand his purpose. "Arthur, are these to be our rooms?" He turned to her, that rare vulnerability visible in his expression again. "If you wish it. I hoped, we might use these as our private apartments. A place that is truly ours, separate from the weight of tradition or the shadows of the past." The gesture touched her deeply. This man who had been so resistant to emotional attachment, now offering to create a shared sanctuary for them. "I would like that very much," she said softly. Relief and pleasure crossed his face. "There's one more thing," he added, leading her toward a smaller door she hadn't noticed. "This was my mother's particular pride." The door opened onto a private walled garden, sheltered from view and accessible only from their apartments. Even in October it remained beautiful, a tranquil oasis with stone benches, a small fountain, and late-blooming flowers still offering color against the autumn foliage. "It's perfect," Elena whispered, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of his surprise. "Absolutely perfect." Arthur's expression softened as he watched her delight. "I wanted to create something new for us, not bound by the constraints of our beginning or the expectations of others. A place that belongs only to Elena and Arthur, not to the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield." The distinction was meaningful, acknowledging how far they had come from their initial roles. Elena moved to stand before him, reaching up to touch his face gently. "Thank you for this gift, for everything." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I have one more confession to make," he said, his voice low and intimate in the gathering dusk. "What is it?" she asked. "When I told you I observed you before proposing our arrangement, that wasn't entirely accurate," Arthur admitted. "The truth is, I noticed you the first moment you entered Lady Harrington's musical. You stood apart from the others, genuine, unaffected. Something about you called to me even then, though I wasn't ready to acknowledge it." He drew her closer, his arms encircling her waist. "When I learned of your family's difficulties, I told myself I was being practical, strategic, that our marriage would be a sensible solution for both of us. But I think, even then, some part of me was seeking a reason to claim you." The confession, this proud man acknowledging the emotions he had denied even to himself, moved Eleanor deeply. "And now," she whispered. "What do you seek now?" "Only this," he replied simply. "You, us. A life together built on truth rather than arrangement." As twilight deepened around them in their private garden, Elena realized how completely her life had transformed. From reluctant bride to beloved wife, from marriage of convenience to partnership of choice, the journey had been unexpected but infinitely precious. "I love you, Arthur," she said, the words she had held back for weeks, finally finding voice. "Not the Duke of Thornfield, not the arrangement, but you, the man who defended me at the Pemberton ball, who sat beside my father's sickbed, who created this sanctuary for us. Just you." The last of his carefully constructed walls seemed to crumble at her declaration. "And I love you, Elena," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I believed possible, more than I have ever loved anyone." Their kiss in the twilight garden sealed this new beginning. No longer a contract between strangers, but a covenant between two hearts that had found each other against all odds and expectations. London, December 1847. Snow fell softly outside the windows of Lady Pemberton's grand ballroom, but inside, warmth and light prevailed as the cream of society gathered for her traditional Christmas ball. Chandeliers glittered above elegantly dressed nobles, while musicians played seasonal melodies and servants circulated with champagne and delicacies. Near the entrance, a ripple of interest passed through the crowd as the major domo announced, "His Grace, the Duke of Thornfield, and Her Grace the Duchess of Thornfield. Arthur and Elena descended the staircase together, a striking couple that drew every eye. Eleanor, radiant in a gown of deep burgundy velvet with diamonds at her throat and in her golden hair, smiled up at her husband with undisguised affection. Arthur, handsome in formal black evening wear, kept her hand possessively on his arm, his customary reserve softened by the tenderness in his gaze whenever it rested on his wife. Lady Pemberton hurried forward to greet them, her manner markedly different from their last encounter at her ball. "Arthur, my dear boy, and Duchess, how perfectly lovely you look tonight. We are so honored by your presence." The change in her attitude was unsurprising. In the month since the scandal at her midsummer ball, society had witnessed the transformation of the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield's marriage from supposed arrangement to obvious love match. Their evident happiness and Arthur's clear devotion to his wife had silenced most of the earlier whispers and turned many former critics into eager supporters. "Lady Pemberton," Arthur acknowledged with cool courtesy. "A beautiful gathering, as always." "Indeed," Eleanor added warmly. "The decorations are particularly splendid this year." As they moved into the ballroom, Eleanor spotted Charlotte across the room, looking enchanting in her first formal gown as a debutante. Under Elena and Arthur's sponsorship, Charlotte had been introduced to society the previous month and was already attracting considerable attention from eligible gentlemen. "Your sister appears to be enjoying herself," Arthur observed, following Elena's gaze. "Thanks to you," she replied softly. "Your kindness to my family has meant everything, Arthur." He squeezed her hand gently. "They are my family now, too." As they circulated through the ballroom, accepting congratulations and engaging in polite conversation, Eleanor noticed Lady Beatrice Ashworth watching them from across the room. Unlike Lady Pemberton, Beatrice had not been quick to revise her attitude toward Elena. Still beautiful but noticeably thinner, with a brittle quality to her smile, she stood with a small circle of admirers, though her attention remained fixed on Arthur and Elena. "She still hasn't forgiven us," Elena murmured to Arthur. He glanced briefly in Beatrice's direction before dismissing her with a slight shrug. "Her forgiveness is irrelevant. Her ability to harm you, however, concerns me." "I'm no longer vulnerable to her barbs," Elena assured him. "Not now." The music changed to a waltz, and Arthur led Elena onto the dance floor. As they moved together with the practiced ease of partners who had grown increasingly attuned to each other, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in less than a year. Her father had recovered sufficiently to enjoy his new life in Bath, where he was courting a respectable widow who seemed to bring out the best in him. Charlotte was flourishing under Elena's guidance, while her younger sisters were receiving the education and opportunities that had once seemed impossible. And Elena herself had found a happiness beyond anything she could have imagined when she signed that fateful contract in her father's study. "What are you thinking?" Arthur asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About beginnings and endings," she replied. "How what began as necessity has become the greatest joy of my life." His eyes softened. "Mine as well." As the waltz ended, Arthur kept her hand in his. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, leading her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. "I received word from Dr. Morris yesterday." Elena's pulse quickened at his serious tone. "Is it about father? Has he suffered a relapse?" "No, nothing like that," Arthur assured her quickly. "It's about you, Elena. The symptoms you've been experiencing, the morning fatigue, the sensitivity to certain foods." Understanding dawned, and Elena's hand went instinctively to her abdomen. "You mean—" Arthur nodded, joy and pride evident in his expression. "Dr. Morris believes we will welcome a new Wellesley to the Abbey by midsummer." The news, suspected but now confirmed, filled Elena with overwhelming happiness. "A child," she whispered. "Our child." Arthur drew her closer, propriety momentarily forgotten as he pressed his forehead to hers. "The first of many, I hope," he murmured. "If you're willing." "Very willing," she assured him, blinking back happy tears. From across the room, Lady Beatrice watched their intimate exchange with narrowed eyes. Unable to contain her curiosity and resentment, she approached them with a brittle smile. "Your Graces," she greeted them with exaggerated deference. "How delightful to see you again after so many months." "Lady Beatrice," Arthur acknowledged coolly, his arm protectively around Elena's waist. Beatrice's gaze flicked between them, noting their obvious closeness. "Society has missed your presence these past months. Hiding away at the Abbey, I understand." "Enjoying my wife's company," Arthur corrected firmly. "A pleasure I would recommend to any husband fortunate enough to have married for love rather than convenience." The pointed remark struck home, and Beatrice's artificial smile faltered. "How romantic, though one does hear such interesting whispers about marriages that begin as arrangements." Eleanor met her gaze steadily. "Perhaps you should listen less to whispers, Lady Beatrice, and more to truth spoken plainly. Arthur and I are happy, genuinely, completely happy." "How fortunate for you both," Beatrice replied, unable to fully mask her bitterness. "Though happiness can be fleeting." "Not ours," Arthur stated with quiet conviction. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe I promised my wife another dance." As he led Eleanor away, Beatrice called after them, "You've changed, Arthur. The man I knew would never have been so demonstrative." Arthur paused, turning back to her with a small, genuine smile. "You're right, Beatrice. I have changed. For the better, I believe." On the dance floor once more, Elena leaned close to murmur, "That was rather pointed." "Sometimes clarity is kinder than ambiguity," Arthur replied. "Besides, I find I no longer have patience for society's games or petty cruelties, not when they're directed at those I love." The simple declaration, this once reserved man openly acknowledging his feelings, warmed Elena's heart. "Nor do I," she agreed. "Life is too precious to waste on pretense." As the music swelled around them, Arthur gazed down at his wife with undisguised adoration. "I have a confession, Duchess," he said softly. "Another one?" she teased. "You're becoming quite forthcoming, Your Grace." "Only with you," he assured her. "I was just thinking how fortunate it was that your father lost his fortune." Eleanor laughed in surprise. "That's a rather unusual sentiment." "But true," Arthur insisted, spinning her gently with the music. "Without that financial disaster, I might never have found the courage to approach you, and you might never have accepted me." "Perhaps fate has a sense of irony," Elena suggested, "taking one kind of wealth to give us another, far more valuable." As the snow continued to fall outside, and London society swirled around them, the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield moved together in perfect harmony. Two people who had begun as strangers, bound by contract and necessity, only to discover that true love often arrives in the most unexpected guises. Their eyes met in shared understanding. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, no longer married merely for appearances, but united in heart and soul. The end. Dear listener, there are moments in life when everything seems to happen out of duty, not desire. We accept, we endure, we carry on with heavy hearts, not as those living a dream, but as those fulfilling an obligation. And yet, time, that wise old companion, has a way of turning the unexpected into a blessing, and the chill of duty into the warmth of true affection. The story of Elena and Arthur reminds us that not everything born of appearances ends without soul, that love can rise even after pain, that respect can heal old wounds, and that one gesture, like that kiss in front of so many judging eyes, can speak louder than 1,000 promises. Real life is no different. Even in our hardest seasons, there is still room for the unexpected, for tenderness, for a new chapter filled with meaning. So tonight, take a deep breath. Let your heart be still. You who have faced so much, who have been strong when no one was watching, deserve to rest in peace, wrapped in a quiet sense of comfort, protection, and love. May sleep come to you like a gentle embrace, and may tomorrow greet you with the quiet certainty that beauty still waits for you. With all our affection, Legends of the Fall Team. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If this story stirred something in your soul, please subscribe, like, comment, and share it with others who also believe in second chances and love that heals. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for supporting our channel. Your support motivates us every day to keep writing new stories, filled with love, redemption, and emotional twists that stay with you long after the video ends. At the end of this video, another beautiful story awaits. Click and be surprised by more emotional tales crafted just for you.